UK has a problem and it's time we started talking about it. Hi everyone, my name is Kay, also known as Coyote. I'm Nigerian-American, currently based in Lagos, Nigeria, and before this I spent 3 years living and working in London. In this video, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on why I think a lot of young professionals and entrepreneurs are choosing to leave the UK. You've probably heard a lot of reasons why people may not enjoy living in the UK, particularly from people who are not from there and therefore do not understand or are not accustomed to life and culture. These reasons may range from things like the weather, which the UK can't really control, to other things that they can control, such as the high income tax or even the general bad vibes that you've heard people complain about in London. I thought it would be helpful to share my perspective as a Nigerian born, American raised expat who moved to the UK for a job. I spent 2 years living in South London and 1 year living in the East, and during this time, I worked in the corporate world in investment banking. And after 3 years living and working there, these are 5 reasons that I think people may not enjoy living in the UK. Some of them we can control, others we can't. One of the biggest downsides about living in the UK is undoubtedly the weather. I wanted to get this one out of the way because it's something that you can't really control. The government can't really control it. It is just a way and a fact of life and something that comes with living in the UK. And one of the questions I get asked the most is it really as bad as people say? The answer, hear me loud and clear, is yes. It is undoubtedly miserable when it comes to weather in the UK. On average, the UK gets about 11 to 15 days of rain every month, and this number increases in the wintertime. There are stretches where you may not see the sun for 5, 7, up to 10 days, even, and this really has an impact on your well being. Personally, I never realized just how big an impact the lack of sunlight would have on me, especially in the summertime. Unfortunately, it does rain a lot in the summertime as well. And of the 3 summers I spent living in the UK, we only had one really beautiful summer that I could remember. There was a huge heat wave, which I really enjoyed. And one thing to consider as well is that when the heat does come, there is almost zero air conditioning in homes, in personal homes, when it comes to life in the UK. So that's something to consider as well. But a lot of the summer times, we didn't need that air conditioning because oftentimes the summer just never really arrived. It rained for a majority of the summer, to which left me personally feeling like I never really got to enjoy the summer or I got ripped off. With that said, when the sun does shine in the UK, people appreciate it so much more, and that really changes the mood and demeanor of Londoners, especially. People become much more friendly, much more open. But that leaves people wondering, am I just living for the sunny days in the UK? I would much rather personally be living in a place, that where I can enjoy good weather year round than living for those sunny days, which can be few and far between in London. This next one's a bit controversial. Most people either strongly agree with me or strongly disagree. However, I personally found the food in London to be not very good. I've lived in a lot of cities that are known for their cuisine and known for their food scenes, known for innovation and execution. And unfortunately, I just don't think London meets that standard. Hear me out. When it comes to excellent food, I think of two things: taste and execution. Oftentimes, when I went out to eat in London, I found that the food looked good, but actually, when it came to the taste of it or the execution of the dish, it just didn't stack up. The shame is London has a very broad and very diverse food scene that represents the range of cultures of people that are living in the city. However, when it comes to the execution of these dishes, I often found that oftentimes, they've actually been watered down to meet the British palate. Some prime examples include Asian food, Thai food. When it comes to, for instance, a very classic dish like a pad Thai noodle, unfortunately, the execution and the taste isn't always right. Oftentimes, I found that the noodles came often bland, unseasoned, and poorly prepared, oftentimes sticking together. I often found that British culture doesn't really prioritize lunch. People opt for fast, casual restaurants, like quick grab and go sandwiches at Pret or Greg, rather than investing time and effort into really quality, flavorful lunch dishes. This is not to say that you cannot find good food in London. There's a number of fancy five-star restaurants. London has a high number of Michelin star restaurants, actually. However, fancy Michelin star restaurants does not make a food scene. The reason I love New York's food scene is because there's a broad range of diverse and tasteful options at every single price point. London really struggles when it comes to the fast casual types of establishments. These types of restaurants are actually also very critical to a city's food scene and add to the richness and the diversity of the flavor profile of a city. Unfortunately, I think London has a long way to go when it comes to flavor and execution of food. This next one is a primary concern for those who are more fiscally minded, but the UK has one of the highest income tax of any place I've ever lived. For single folks and young professionals who aren't taking advantage of the free services that the government uses this money to pay for, it leaves you wondering whether or not it's actually worth paying these high income tax. This is why many people have cited leaving the UK for places that are considered tax havens like Dubai. When I was living in London, roughly 30% of my salary was deducted every single month to cover these taxes. While I did benefit from some of the services, I used the NHS, public transport, the parks, 30% is still quite a lot. And when you're building for the future and we're considering having a family, these are considerations that you think about when it comes to choosing a place to live. This next one is a tough one, something that I don't think will ever change and is honestly woven into the fabric of British society, but this is classism. And as a result of that, the lack of social mobility. One of the biggest differences I noticed when I moved from the US, where anything is possible, you still have this fragment of the American dream. You're encouraged to move up, and there are systems in place to help people move up. In the UK, this feels very, very different. People are hyper aware of social and economic classes, and it is much more difficult, particularly for people of color and I think Africans, to move between these classes. And even if you do end up moving between these classes, you are never truly, it would feel and it would appear, accepted or considered part of another class. You can never really move between classes or move up into an upper class or a higher class despite having or making the money um, to move you and your family into that social economic status, if you will. This I found very challenging and very confusing to cope and deal with because coming from societies like the US where it is a meritocracy and the amount of effort that you put in we're taught is directly related to your outcome kind of runs counter to this classist environment in the UK. So like someone with my background where I was born in a developing country and I've worked hard to ensure that me and my family kind of move up the social economic ladder, you can imagine that it was particularly jarring to move to a place like the UK. My final observation is another social nuance that you can only really understand and feel once you've lived in a place like London. But for lack of a better way to put it, I think my observation is that London is a little too nonchalant for its own good. What does that mean? Unlike the US, and even places like Lagos, where I'm at right now, where hustle and effort is encouraged, idolized, grit is almost, for better or worse, worshipped. In a place like London, putting in too much effort can be seen as off putting. Digest that for a minute. Showing that you care too much about something or that you are too invested in something, whether it is, a friendship, a job opportunity, a collaboration, an opportunity, is unfortunately or inherently off putting to a lot of British people and seemingly runs counter to British culture. That was my experience. There are often terms like, you are often seen as being a beg, or you're often times seen as trying too hard, or trying too hard is seen as uncool in London. But in places like the US, this is the culture, right? This is what is kind of worship. It is that meritocracy. And unfortunately, I think British culture are doing themselves a disservice because ultimately, as the UK falls further and further behind other countries that are more focused on hustle culture, the UK is, for better or worse, slipping behind by trying to look cool or trying to look like we don't care too much. Unfortunately, people are leaving, people are noticing this, and the really, really hungry people are seeking opportunities elsewhere. So my recommendation is that people in the UK, especially in London, need to actually have a look at this attitude and try actually to embody a bit of more of that hustle culture that is making other economies around the world thrive. There you have it, y'all. Those are 5 key reasons that I think people are leaving the UK and seeking greener pastures. Coming from someone who's lived in the UK, lived and worked in the UK for 3 years. Personally, after the many challenges, I actually grew to love my time in the UK in that final year. The first 2 years were a bit challenging, but ultimately, London is the type of place that it is a slow burn. if and when you do find your place, you find that you actually start to really, really love it. But it does take a lot of work. So my recommendation to anyone who's living there or who's considering to moving there, kind of take this advice. Digest it and learn how to kind of navigate British culture with that in mind. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for watching the video. If you like what you see, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be sharing more videos on how to navigate cultures across borders. Thanks. Talk soon.